follows a kind of Celtic path, and I'm here in the land of the Celtic Gaelic people. And one of the things she taught me was that there's something called a post-empire mindset. And what she meant by that is that for our society to actually move from wanting to hoard and hold and own and possess everything, they have to actually meet that top of the empire and go past it. Because then suddenly it's not about how many pieces of land, how many things can I control, how many armies do I have to command. It's what can I do, what is the quality of life? And that's one of the things I think here in England and Great Britain and the UK, you are in. You're in a post-empire mindset because you concern yourselves with the quality of life and not just the ownership of things, of objects, of places. In the United States, we're very young, obviously, and we don't necessarily possess that in terms of people that have come over and become the citizens in our country. But what we have is we do have a post-empire mindset among the Native Americans. So one of the things I'm going to be sharing with you this evening is how, as this image shows, as above, so below, how patterns are inherent in culture, and our spirituality, and our humanity, and our psychology, and our sociology, even quantum physics, and how when we want to make a difference, it's by recognizing those patterns and working within the confines, within the natural flow of nature to really enhance the work that we do. One of the things I'd like to share with you, the first thing I'd like to show, if I can see, you said, which button do I do? There you go. One of the first things that I want to emphasize is I'm not an expert on sacred pattern. I'm a student of many teachers, and I want to give credit to some of these people because I'm going to share with you the things they've taught me over the years. One is Dr. Erwin Laszlo. He is a remarkable man in his 80s, really committed to trying to help us transform the world that we're in. The gentleman in the middle next to him at the top is Ricardo Cervantes Cervantes, Valois Capantacupli. He is the spiritual leader of the Tolteca of Teotihuacan. And a lot of the knowledge I'll be sharing with you came from him as well. The man next to him is Dr. Don Edward Beck, and he is basically the man that has taken Claire Graves' work on spiral dynamics and has taken it into a much more fascinating and accurate way in which I'll be showing as well. Of course, you guys already know Mr. Keith Critchlow. Underneath, there's also Lama Tenzin Doden. He is the ambassador of compassion for the Dalai Lama. And over here is also Stephen Stefano, who is someone that I really consider to be a wonderful teacher as well. So I just want to begin by emphasizing that what I'm sharing with you is stuff that has been taught to me, and I'm being blessed to be able to pass it on to you. One of the most important things in terms of transformation is you can't transform society without transforming oneself. This is what I call the gateway to the heart. And I wanted to share this with you because you can see across all of these different traditions, there is a moment and a place in time where it's transformed in the heart. There are two different paths. There's one which they call the mysties, the knowledge path. When you're learning things, when you're learning pattern, you're learning statistics, you're learning data. Then there's the path of the sword, spirituality, the apotic, when something greater than you comes in and touches the heart. I'm going to share a very personal thing with you. Actually, all of this is personal. I've never really shared most of this in such a complete way in one place with people before. But one time I was in Japan, in Tokyo, and my husband, who's a great foodie, had taken me to some place and we'd eaten and eaten and eaten. And I was just so full. I'm walking out there like this, and suddenly I get hungry. And the further along I go, the hungrier I got. I just couldn't, every part of me was so famished. And I looked up, and there was a man in a cardboard box. And I knew that hunger was his hunger. And I went and I bought a burger and I gave it to him. And as he ate each bite, I lost my hunger. That is something that can't be taught. That's something that's a gift. So I want to recognize that spirit itself is a major teacher in all of this. And that is really when you start seeing, the image of the Christ pointing at the heart and others, that's the internal transformation. And that's a gift. But when you start looking at the mysties, knowledge, that's something that can be shared. And that's where I'm going to be going this evening. the path of the sword, spirituality, Patek, that I was sharing with you. What was said to the rose that made it open is said to be here in my chest. It's the question of how do you open the heart? And that's what we're trying to do with the building, with the campus, and our programs around the world. One of the places that I've been able to learn is with the Toltec people of Teotihuacan. And they talk about there are two different types of being. There's the tonali, which is what you end up receiving when you come into this lifetime, and the Tuolia, which is the divinized heart. And the divinized heart is what we try to attain in this world. And what they talk about when they mention the pathway of the dead, it's not so much in Teotihuacan a pathway of death like the Europeans understood it. It's a place of transformation. The idea being that when you go through this process, you can't have that awakening while your body is still alive in this place and time. And the reason why I want to share this with you is it's a really prime example of how the ancients used architecture to share very complex concepts. One of the places that is the most remarkable, that very few people know about, and which plays a huge role in informing the Memnosyne Institute and what we're trying to do, is this place called Sociological. And people walked all the way from Alaska and from the tips of Argentina on foot to get to basically central Mexico. And in this place, when you're close up to one of those, every one of those buildings has architecture from tons of different cultures, tons of different beliefs. But inside each one holds knowledge that is shared humanity's knowledge. Knowledge of mathematics, knowledge of spirit, knowledge of art. And they have immense technology. Today, if you go into that cave and you put your hand there, you can actually see your bones in the shadow like an X-ray. If you go over here and you can see they have flowing water, they have hot and cold water. This technology existed, and it is absolutely remarkable that when you go there, you'll also see symbols from Tibet, New Zealand, Africa, and many, many other places. For us and the work that we do with Memnosyne, we wanted to know, is it possible to build something like this? And to me, when I see something like this, it's more than just possible, it has happened. Half the world has done something like this before. Half the world put aside war, put aside competition, just to help each other get to such a place to share knowledge because they believed it was important for the benefit of humanity. Now, one of the things about this legend is they said, how did we know that this is a person that we want to help out? Well, people carried with them a butterfly. And the butterfly wasn't just any butterfly. There's this actual sacred design to it, and I'll get to that in a moment. But the reason why they did that is that let all the other tribes know this is someone to feed, to clothe, to help on their journey. Because in helping him or her, we're going to be helping our own people. I want to emphasize this butterfly because the butterfly that they carried was essentially a Merkaba for humanity. And when we start understanding basically what these people were doing, they carried the butterfly either on their chest or they carried it underneath their mouth. And when they carried it underneath their mouth, as what teacher talks about, it's when you share the word. And it always comes out in a Fibonacci spiral. And the reason is because that's a natural pattern and flow of the world. When they carry it here on their chest, it's talking about that way of the heart that I shared with you. So there's the knowledge, and there's the heart, the experience. And both of these were seen as patterns and a means to get to it. One of the most fascinating things, and since I know some of you here like gematria, I wanted to share this with you. This symbol and the silver that you see is what the Toltecs of Teotihuacan have. They consider this a symbol of the new age, the time that we are in right now. And they talk about that as being when we have the divinity and humanity uniting together. When they talked about this, it was Quetzalcoatl was the idea he would return, but not as walking on the ground. The idea was Quetzalcoatl would return and a shared consciousness, a shared recognition that we each have a piece of spirit. And when we looked at each other, we would be able to resonate with that. They have a similar idea in the Abrahamic faith when you hear about the Ark of the Covenant. And a lot of people gloss over this, but actually if you read it cautiously, carefully, you see when the two angels were embracing each other, about to hug each other, they were recognizing the presence of divinity in them. And it's when they were holding each other and about to embrace each other, and they could see that the Shekinah had a place to live among man. So it's a very similar concept between Quetzalcoatl and Quetzalcoatl. one of the things that we can learn when we talk about the ancients is they believed that we live in an integral reality. The metaphysical, the physical, and the mental were all seen as basically as above, so below. The patterns of each of these levels echoed each other. So here are some of the different terms that you might have heard. Also at the bottom, tonali and triolia, those are the terms that are used among the Tolteca. Just to try and illustrate how as above, so below, when you think of the newest sphere that Teilhard de Chardin talked about, think about the internet and how we're being connected. Again, as above, so below. So when we start looking at this, we ask ourselves, well then, what is the word? What is the sacred word that we share? How do we add to this? So that's what I want to do with you for just a brief moment. How do you discover what your word is? Because none of this metaphysical stuff means anything if it doesn't feed somebody who is outside right now freezing in the cold. It doesn't mean anything if we end up polluting our planet. It doesn't mean anything if people are struggling to get by every day. So what I want to ask you is everyone here that has a passion about the environment, raise your hand. Everyone here that cares about that? Okay, I'm going to give this to you. I would like you to take one end of the string and hand it to somebody else. Pass that around to the whole room, toss it if you want to. Anyone here that is feeling passionate, the environment is something you put a lot of time into. You think about, it is your priority in life. Just toss it around the room to the next person. You gotta toss it all the way in the back, that's fine. Just get it going wherever, who here, keep your hand up so they know who to toss it to. Who here is big about the environment? Toss it to the next person. Pass this around the room. Thank you. Just keep it going. So as you're passing that around about the environment, but when we talk about the environment, we can't really discuss what to do about it if we're not looking at economics, can we? We can't actually do any changes without bringing in economics. So who here actually thinks about business? Business is a big part of your life. You want to make money, you need to pay the bills, it's a big preoccupation with you. Anybody? Okay, here's someone, here's a businessman over here. I know we got someone in here that's into business. Okay, please pass it around to those who have business. Now, when we start looking at business, well then we start thinking to ourselves, how do we actually make that kind of difference in economics without thinking about humans? You know, humans come into the picture. There's human rights. Who here is big about human rights? Okay, pass it around to somebody else. Just, you can throw that thing. I know somebody here knows how to throw. Just toss it to somebody else that's into that. Come on, get it to the side of the room. I know there are people over here that have to care about human rights. Who here is caring about somebody? It could be LGBT issues. It could be the poor. It could be any issue. It could be people not getting paid enough, you know, for minimum wage. But who here cares about human rights? Somebody. Okay, there's someone over here. Toss that over here. Okay. So when you start talking about human rights, one of the other things that comes into it is look at the wide diversity of the world. We have all sorts of races, cultures, religions all over the world. Who here is fascinated by that? That thinks culture is fascinating? Who here loves the diversity of our humanity? Pass that to someone over there who has their hand up. Keep your hands up, please. Okay, toss that to somebody who has the balls. Okay, all right, you're at the end of it? Wow, okay, well, let's hold it up. Please hold that up in the room. Everybody who's holding a piece that's been lifted up over your head, take a look. Okay, now see, please look up. Okay, there you go. Everybody looks up. Now, that gives you one little blip. We have about 100 people in here. That is one tiny little snapshot. And you can put your hands down. That is one tiny snapshot of how integrated our world is today. So when we talk about a globalized culture and variety of things and making sustainable programs, if we don't map out those interconnections, it's not sustainable. And if we try and understand how our impact is, we basically have to make a web of ourselves. We have to look at our political influence, our religious influence, cultural influence, your personal everyday choices, human rights, social influence, environmental impact, economic influence, the means for accumulating wealth, and the means for positive impact. When you start putting them over each other, you start realizing exactly where you are. And when you realize where you are and you embrace that consciously, that becomes your word. So that gives you kind of the basic idea behind what Memnosyne is doing. And I'm going to just delve a little bit deeper into the metaphysical. When we talk about the word is the individual represented by, in a lot of this work, you can see that as I was talking about that spiral coming out of his mouth. And this particular piece is icon up there is my personal drawing, one of the pieces that you'll see in Teotihuacan many times. And it comes out in a spiral again because they're going with the natural rhythm of life. And I wanted to share two particular quotes with you. As above, so below, as we all know, thought Hermes. But also I wanted to share something with you that many of us have heard, you know, the prayer, Our Father who art in heaven, let it be on earth as it is in heaven. Many of us have not looked at these two quotes next to each other, but it's there. And what they're trying to, in my belief, they're trying to share is when we live in harmony, full harmony with the natural rhythm of those cycles, then we become an actual conscious process of co-creating the world around us. One of the beautiful places to see this is actually a place called Tolteca of Teotihuacan. And what you will see in that is all these individuals sharing their word. And at the same time, they're within double helixes that form a web of life. And you see the earth is also full of double helixes. And what they're sharing is the idea of what they call the Zohan, the idea of the universe as a living sentient being. And underneath the net, some of you think of it as a noosphere, some people call it the Akashic record, some people call it the web, whatever you want to call it. And I wanted to superimpose this because we often think about the story of Jesus telling the disciples to throw the net over the other side and fish and it catches. People say, well, that's a strange thing to stick in there. Why do we want to know about that? Well, when you actually look at cultures and they share this knowledge across time and place, and across geographic location, you start really seeing how that information is encoded. And it is the same. And it's showing how our individual word helps truly create existence. One of the most beautiful expressions of this is the Tao, and that's the name of it in the Tolteca tradition and of course around the world. Wanted to share this particular image because once again, you have viscous piscus being birthed out of the Tao, each one of those places coming from the heart. This is part of the sketch, this is in the process of being done, but I just wanted to re-emphasize how this knowledge really is humanity's knowledge. And all these great teachers pass it on again and again through the ages. So that brings us to the physical. Those same understanding, that same pattern, that same knowledge that we're all an expression of that first divine breath. It's expressed in the physical every day. And because I'm somewhere not the master that Keith is in terms of the everyday biological world, I'm going to share with you what they're showing in quantum physics. And again, as above, so below. What I'll try to express is what Nassim Haramein, who's a quantum physicist, has explained. And you can see this picture of him with all these little Merkabas within Merkaba. One of the things he emphasizes is that if you have a point and you scan into that point even deeper, you have the patterns in that point. And then you can scan it even deeper and you have the patterns in that point. So reality becomes fractal. Each one is within it and deeper and deeper. And it's fractal because the more you go out, you'll see the same pattern again and again. And interestingly, one of the beautiful designs that he did, and he didn't do this purposely, I got to have a long conversation with him. He just was taking a photo of his model and he realized the shadow underneath, which I'm sure you guys will recognize. There's a closer look at the shadow. And again, this is quantum physics, not metaphysics, quantum physics. So when we start looking at this, we understand, as he's explaining, think of it like a drain. Think of a faucet going down and completely filling the bathtub again and again. And what that means, and you can see how the Fibonacci spiral goes in and on itself, is that it's almost like a breath. And that if you could imagine having something twisted, or when you see cotton candy being done and a piece comes off and another piece comes off and another piece comes off, but imagine that being fractal. Each one's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And so what he's showing is that all the way down to our DNA, actually down to the tiniest particle, that same pattern is there. And then when you move out into the universe, that same pattern is there. So what he's showing is that there is a beautiful rhyme and reason just according to physics, as to why we see the patterns recurring again and again. For those that get really into science, I thought I'd share with you his model that goes into it much more in depth. Keep that there for a few moments for those that want to really take a good look at it. One of the most important things that he talks about with this is he says this supports and gives a whole new meaning to the age-old philosophical concept promoted by many distinguished teachers in history, that the universe is one. Really think about it. The pattern in your DNA, the pattern in every single molecule of your body, is the same pattern that is in the Milky Way. It's the same pattern that's in a flower. It's the same pattern that the ancients talked about. Does that not make you feel as being part of the one? And I want to bring us back to something that the ancients had shared again. Remember the Zohan, the universe itself being a living sentient being, represented by all-encompassing codices, holding smaller and smaller codices, each repeating and speaking the holy words, the Fibonacci spiral. So how is it that they knew this so long ago and we're just discovering it again in quantum physics? It's a humbling prospect to realize that we're not discovering, we're rediscovering what is really our ancestral right, our ancestral knowledge to know. And as we discover more about the world around us, we discover more and more reasons to be passionate about being part of this world consciously in a way that many of us haven't ever dreamed we could be. Which brings us to something else, the sociological, mental, psychological. In working with Dr. Don Edward Beck, he talks about how society evolves so that each level contains the prior consciousness of those before it, and must contain it in order to evolve past it. Here are some of the codes that illustrate how each one of those levels happens. And he talks about how Claire Graves, who he studied from, was not inventing this concept, but rather discovered the pattern inherent in humanity's consciousness. So if you look at that conch shell, the idea is in the beginning, you have that beige area, that's when we're tribal, we're just thinking about survival. We get into that purple, we get a bit more superstitious. The red is that mind, that fighting, that warfare. You keep growing up, you get orange, it's corporates, everything's about money, making the money. Green is when you have a kumbaya person and everything's for everybody, but you know what? They're not really taking human nature into account. What we all hope to eventually get up to is the turquoise, where we end up saying, we want to use these established systems and be able to transcend, be able to help humanity to evolve. I want to give you a bit of an idea of how powerful this is. This model, when they started, Claire Graves had the idea, but Don Beck had the added opportunity of actually having computers feed data into these models. And they were actually able to accomplish remarkable things once they started doing that. They were able to predict the shooting in Norway for the Nobel Prize Foundation. Singapore and Egypt are able to dramatically reduce potential terrorist threats by tracking the sociological trends. Right now, you have marketing companies worth billions of dollars that, and as well as, nations internationally, and they're using this, but they're all focused on trying to prevent terrorism or trying to, find ways to make money. But Don wanted to take it further. And this is something that I think is remarkable. When they put this into, thanks to Ross Perot at Texas Instruments, and they put all this data, not just the data that they were using to, about terrorism and whatnot, but when they showed ecological data, interests, demographics, religions, all these different things, every one of you that held up a string, all that data and all the other topics that were not considered, and they fed it into the machine, into the computer. The computer produced the information and showed what it looked like. And without them forcing it to, it looks like a double helix of DNA. So our shared consciousness of humanity for an entire city, the city of Dallas, looks like a helix of DNA. That means that our shared consciousness as human beings follows the same pattern as all these others in the ancient time. Follows the same pattern as we find in biology. Follows the same pattern as we find in ancient religions. So what I want to give you an idea is what we're going to be doing with this building. Inside the building, we plan to have a hologram. And what we realize is when you print out the information, it's out of date immediately because the data is changed from second to second. But these computers can actually feed it in real time. And you show it as an actual hologram. then when you look at it, you'll be able to see it changing, moving. You'll be able to press a button and understand how does economic data change it, how does environmental data change it, and you'll actually see a reflection of the shared consciousness of humanity in one strand. What this means is that we're living at a time where, in a sense, very real sense, we can actually see a reflection of ourselves. What does that mean? You know, what Beck talks about is when we understand the code that we share as humanity, it allows us to actually map out our humanitarian outreach so that we are doing it even more strategically. We're doing it with an interior understanding. So in summation, I want to be able to leave you with this. Modern science reveals that Fibonacci patterns found in our understandings of the metaphysical, the physical, and the mental. So again, as above, so below. And when we started looking at this, our challenge, not an easy challenge, was how do we take all this information and we actually make the building itself a source of outreach. What you're seeing right here is how the Memnosyne Institute, we end up deciding our programs. We understand the personal, it's spiritual, emotional, political, social. That's the interior motivation of something. The intellectual, sound reasoning, it's got to make perfect sense. It's got to have a strategy that's going to work. The tangible, the outcome. None of this makes any difference unless you have a woman who's working 3 jobs and she's got 4 children to feed. Does it make a difference to her? If it does, then we're on the right path. If it doesn't, then it's all just philosophy. So we want to take this same approach and bring it to our building, which is why when we talk about trying to find someone who can understand the natural patterns of existence, it made perfect sense to bring it to Keith Critchlow. Giving you a brief look at the Center for Outreach and the way we plan to use it, our top area would be for all the different offices of our own organization. And the next level is about collaborations, organizations just like this one, which are really understanding an integral approach to challenges in the world. We want to be able to offer them office space so that people can actually meet and work together. And at the bottom, we'll have exhibitions that give a much more in-depth vision of all the information I shared with you tonight, but people can interact and understand it. And of course, in the center, the vital signs monitor. So without being lectured to, people can start recognizing that inherent pattern. So I want to leave you with this last bit here, because this is that mural, and this is something that Keith Critchlow said a while back. And it really rings true in this moment in time when we are recognizing of our quantum physics, what computers are revealing our sociological analysis of our own species, what we see in ancient times. This truly is the truth. Mankind confirms his own ground for being by his capacity of conceiving this archetypal pattern and sustains his world by recreating it in that world. If we want to try and help sustain this world, and we really, without trying to be scary, if any of you actually do the research, we are at a point where we have to concern ourselves with sustaining what we have, to leave something solid, leave something better, leave something that's going to inspire that next generation. Ancient generations created this. What are we creating for that next generation so that they don't have to rediscover this knowledge? So our information about the Memnosyne Institute, and I'll just leave you with this quote. The world is more interconnected than ever. So the question isn't if you are affecting the current and future culture of humanity. Instead, the question is if you are going to embrace your influence consciously. Dare to be a conscious cultural creator. Each one of us, right now in this room, we are the first generation to have absolutely no excuse for ignorance. We want to know something, we click of a button and we can know it. We can know what our investments do, we can know what our actions do. Right now, every one of you is more empowered than any one of you, your ancestors have been before you. So what are we going to do with this? Apathy isn't an excuse. If you choose apathy, it's a choice. But if we want to try and do something for humanity, if we want to try and move ourselves forward as a species, how can we do that? How can we consciously embrace that and be part of bringing in a new world? That's the challenge facing all of us, whether you join us in our work or what you do in your own lives that we embrace today. Thank you. Yeah.